Over 11 years ago, the Long family saw a demand for meat processing here in South Central Missouri. Enter Cabool Kountry Meats. But they wanted to differentiate themselves from other meat processors and decided to focus on USDA and organic inspection. Let's get suited up and learn what all that means. So Sheila, I understand that Cabool Kountry Meats goes back to 2011 when you started it with your husband and your family. But prior to that, you had different careers leading up to that. What first led you to decide that processing meat was needed here in your area and something you wanted to tackle?
Well, we'd always raised our own beef and hogs this year, that kind of thing. And Scott had talked for years about, oh, we should have a processing plant. And it's something, back and forth we talked about. Well, he went to get a couple of beef in, and it was going to be a few months before we could get them in. And he's like, oh, man, this is just ridiculous. There must be a need for this.
Yeah.
So he started working on me to go further into looking into this.
And as a now retired ag teacher, Scott, your husband, has been teaching this type, and we're going to talk to him soon, but teaching these concepts in the classroom. And so it felt natural for you guys to pick up. It wasn't like you just on a whim decided you want to process meat. You had
right.
education in it. Well, let's go talk about that product and head on into the room where it's a little cooler.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, let's start with USDA Inspection. What does that mean and what value does that add to you and your customers?
Right, so when we decided to build this, we decided, okay, we needed to bring in things to our business that made us different from other people so that we could get a bigger share of the market. And so we looked around, and the number of USDA plants in our area was very small. So we decided, okay, we want to be USDA inspected so people can get their meat processed here and then they can sell it. And since we're located so close to the Arkansas border, we knew that was, you can do state inspection, but you have to stay in the state of Missouri to sell it. But being on the Arkansas border, they're an hour away. That way they can come here with their animals, get them processed, and then they can sell them anywhere in the United States.
So now that you're USDA inspected, you also mentioned organic. So the producer has to be sort of certified organic, and they do that on their own. But what do you have to do to be certified organic?
It's very similar to what the producer does. We have to go through a certifying agency. Everything we use in our building is certified organic. We use a special type of vinegar in our acidic washes and everything. We are inspected once a year. And there's also a substantial fee we have to pay to be certified. So it's not something you just willy-nilly go into because it's a commitment. Everything from anything you use on your grass outside, anything that's used in your parking lot, everything has to be organic.
So what is he looking for? What sets that inspection aside from not having a state or USDA inspection?
Well, what he does is he watches every animal unload. He watches them walk to make sure that there are no neurological problems going on. Then once they come into the building and are slaughtered, he checks their, the glands, every little bit. Look for animal health.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about that demand for USDA inspection in the last year to 6 months. We're in the heat of worldwide pandemic, people wondering where their food supply is going to come from next.
Right.
So that has had to have impacted your demand. So thinking back to the past 6 months, how has your business changed?
Well, about, 2 months ago, the world turned upside down, maybe 3, I don't know. And in about a 2-week span, we were always busy, but we were booked 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out. And my customers, they were kind of used to that. Everybody was real laid back, and they knew they could call me and I would get them in, on about whatever day they wanted. I would make things happen. Well, in about just a few days' time, the phone didn't stop ringing. And I went from being 2 weeks to a month out to being a year. Like if you called me today.
Explain that. Why are you booking far out? Because like you can't just drop animals off. You have to. There's a schedule.
No, you have to have an appointment
and
because
you
we
only
only
have so
do
much storage, right?
We only do so many a day because we're only allowed so many hours a day by USDA. So you have an appointment, and so people are booking their appointments because they're afraid of not being able to get them later, I guess. But I have enough regulars that they've booked their appointments to where if you called me today and said, I have a beef I'd like to get in to have butchered, it would be April of next year before I could get it in. If it was custom,
Yeah.
If it's inspected, it would probably be May before I could get it in. And that's if you have one. If you have several, then it may be July.
Well, Scott, you're the other half of Cabool Kountry Meats. Your tenure has been in ag education. I think that's where we first met a few years ago. So you've been cutting up meat and teaching kids for many years. Exactly. So tell me about what first led you to want to put it all into a business plan.
Well, teaching kids, you learned all the different cuts and all that stuff. I've just always enjoyed it. But I got to looking at the need. It was one of those things, and you could see, the writing on the wall, and I was getting close to retirement, and you can see the writing on the wall. People wanted to know where their food comes from.
Sure.
And so I go, okay, let's see what we can do and put this thing together.
So what are you cutting up today?
We are cutting up a organic grass-fed beef and mainly turning it into all hamburger. We do try to salvage as much quality meat as possible. You will find there's a lot of gristle areas, especially in that neck, that you want to cut out. Otherwise, it just, as I tell these guys, I'm kind of a food channel guru, and I say, if you leave that in there, that's not good eats.
So when it comes to other unique cuts of beef outside of your traditional roast, steak, hamburger, what are you seeing your customers, either being the consumer or the other business, B2B, interested in?
What we see is a lot of traditional cuts, the T-bones, the porterhouses, the filet mignons. Nothing, probably the tri-tip is the big one. Skirt steak is another one that we'll do quite a bit of work with sometimes.
Really more of an art than a science, because every animal, although the species are the same, they're different.
They're all different, and everyone wants something just a little bit different. And then being able to make that present the way that it's sell in the store is also a whole nother aspect of it.
Well, I did learn today that I'm going to go home and try tongue, because we typically don't keep that when we're processing our own beef, but I saw one laying out there, and we were talking earlier. So I think even when you're born and raised in the beef industry, there's always something different and new you can do, and the diversity what you can do with a side of beef.
Sure.
So maybe tongue tacos are in my family's future.
Sounds good.